Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's information session for the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund for fiscal year 2023. We are so excited to have so many early childhood educators join us today and appreciate everyone taking time out of your busy schedules to join us and learn more about the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund. My name is Sarah Mead, and I am the Deputy Superintendent for Early Learning with the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, commonly referred to as OSSE. Before we jump into the meeting, we want to take a few minutes to address housekeeping details. I will pass things over to Julia Banks, who will share that information. Julia.
Thank you, Sarah, and hello, everyone who has joined us tonight. I am Julia Banks, and I am a Community Relations Specialist with the Division of Early Learning at OSSE. Before we get any further into our agenda for this evening, I wanted to share a few important reminders and walk through some Zoom features. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Oh, one more. Thank you. Alrighty, so there are a few Zoom engagement features we want to highlight that you might find useful during the meeting. So first are the language channels, which you can find by clicking the globe icon found on the bar at the bottom of your screen and highlighted on this slide in orange. In addition to offering today's session in English, we also have it available in Spanish and Amharic language channels. Please click the icon and select the language you would like to tune into. If you're in the English call, you should still click EN for the English call. I will now invite the moderators from the Spanish and Amharic language channels to provide instructions for individuals who would like to attend the session in one of those languages.
Buenas tardes. En un momento activaremos los canales de idiomas. Al final de estas instrucciones, seleccione un canal de idioma como se muestra en la pantalla. Aparecerá un icono en forma de globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Selecciónelo y luego seleccione el idioma español en este caso. Si está en una tablet o smartphone, haga clic en los 3 puntos de la parte inferior derecha de su ventana de Zoom y luego en Interpretación, y después en español. Si no selecciona el idioma, no podré escuchar al intérprete cuando un hispanohablante haga un comentario. Pondré estas instrucciones en el chat.
ጤና ይስጥልኝ የአማርኛ ትርጉም መከታተል ለምትፈልጉ በስክሪኑ በታች አካባቢ ግሎብ የሚለውን ይጫኑና አማሪክ የሚለውን ይምረጡ። አመሰግናለሁ። ጤና ይስጥልኝ የአማርኛ ትርጉም መከታተል ለምትፈልጉ ከስክሪኑ ከታች አካባቢ ግሎብ የሚለውን ይጫኑና አማሪክ የሚለውን ይምረጡ። አመሰግናለሁ።
Okay, thank you. We'll give folks a few few seconds to get over to their language channels. And while we do that, we will continue on with a few additional Zoom engagement features. We will use the chat feature highlighted on this screen in the green box throughout today's session to share links and other information with attendees to reference. Next is the leave meeting button, highlighted here in purple. If you need to leave the meeting early, you can click this button. And finally is the Q&A feature. If you have questions you'd like to ask during the session, please submit them using this feature. We will go into a little more depth on how to use the Q&A feature on the next slide. So next slide, please. Thank you. If you have not used the Q&A feature before, here's what it will look like on your screen. To submit a question, you can type in the box seen here highlighted in red and click submit. Please note that we will do our best to answer all the questions that come in. If you have a question that is not addressed during today's meeting, please feel free to email aussie.delcommunications@dc.gov, and we'll also drop that into the chat for you. Next, related to the language channels, the slides we are presenting today are also available in Spanish and Hmeric. We will drop links in the chat, or we drop links in the top chat at the top of the call, but we'll do it one more time just in case. You can also find the links on this slide in case you need to access them. These materials can also be found in the attachment section of the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund webpage on the Aussie website. Just scroll down to the bottom. And we'll also include a link to that webpage in the chat. So today's speakers, after that brief technical overview, I will now introduce you to your speakers for tonight. You'll hear from Sarah Mead, our Deputy Superintendent for Early Learning at the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, also known as Aussie. And you will hear from Ruthie Tesfaye, a Senior Program Manager at AidKit. Thank you, Ruthie and Sarah, for joining us today. I know our attendees are excited to hear from you and learn more about how the Early Childhood Pay Equity Fund will work in fiscal year 2023, as well as learn how to apply for supplemental payments. So the goals of today's meeting are to introduce early childhood educators in DC to the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund, including how the program will work in fiscal year 2023 and beyond, and to explain the application process for fiscal year 2023, including eligibility requirements, the timeline to apply, who should apply, the distribution schedule, and available technical assistance. We will start today's session by sharing how the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund came to be and how it will support early childhood educators in the coming years. Next, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the application for the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund for fiscal year 2023, which will include a live demo of the application from AidKit. And then we'll wrap up and share our next steps. In between these items, we'll answer questions submitted by our attendees in advance of today's session, as well as questions that we receive in the Q&A box. So send your questions in. And before getting into our full agenda, we would like to do a poll. So we're asking, do you plan to submit an application for the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund? And your answers are either yes, no, or unsure. So we'll give you a little bit of time to submit your questions, or not questions, your answers. Alrighty, it looks like just about 75% of attendees have participated in the poll now, a little bit more than that, and an overwhelming majority sound like they're planning on submitting applications. So we're excited to hear that. And with that, I will turn things over to Deputy Superintendent for Early Learning, Sarah Mead, to head into our first agenda item.
Thank you, Julia. I'm excited to hear that so many people are planning to apply for the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund. Hello again to everyone who's joined this evening's information session. I'm so excited to be here with you all this evening. To begin, I want to share some background about the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund, how it came to be and where it's headed, as well as the roles that OSSI and AidKit play in administering the program. I'll also walk through the eligibility criteria to participate in the fund in fiscal year 2023 and share information about payment amounts and the payment schedule. At any point in time while I'm speaking, please feel free to submit questions using the Q&A feature. We'll address those questions as we're able throughout the course of the evening. So, how did we get here in the first place? So about a little over a year ago, in the summer of 2021, the District of Columbia Council passed the district's fiscal year 2022 Budget Support Act, which is the legislation that funds all district agencies for the coming fiscal year. As part of that legislation, the council set aside funding to increase pay for early childhood educators and also created a task force to make recommendations for how those funds should be used to support compensation for the workforce. That task force began meeting in October of 2021, so just over a year ago. It made its first recommendations in January of 2022 and its final recommendations in April of 2022. And this fund and our implementation of it is based largely on those recommendations. Following the task force's initial recommendations, the DC Council passed the Early Childhood Educator Equitable Compensation Task Force Temporary Amendment Act. Say that 3 times fast. But that legislation authorized OSSI to disperse pay equity funds to support pay parity for the early childhood educators in accordance with the recommendations of the Early Childhood Educator Equitable Compensation Task Force. That task force recommendation said that OSSI should partner with an intermediary to distribute supplemental payments directly to early childhood educators in fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 2023, and then shift to distributing funds to child development facilities to include those funds as part of early childhood educators' regular paychecks starting in fiscal year 2024. And I'll talk a little bit about the timing of those specific dates in a minute. OSSI then selected AidKit as the intermediary to administer the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund in April of 2022. And we worked over the summer to stand up the fund, distributed the first round of payments starting in August of 2022, and that application cycle ran through September. Now that we're in the district's fiscal year 2023, which started at the beginning of October, we're excited to launch the fiscal year 2023 payments. So I'll talk a little bit about the timing if we can move on to the next slide. So as I mentioned, for the first 2 years of the fund, fiscal year 2022, which has already ended, and fiscal year 2023, which just started, OSSI will distribute payments directly to eligible early childhood educators. As context, the district's fiscal year starts at the beginning of October and ends at the end of September. So while we're still in calendar year 2022, for the district's fiscal year, we're in 2023. We will continue to distribute payments directly to early childhood educators through the end of fiscal year 2023 or through September of 2023. And then starting next fall in fiscal year 24, we will shift to distributing funds to early childhood development program operators so that they can increase pay for their staff. And we will hold programs that receive funds accountable for increasing pay for their staff as well. We'll share more information about how exactly that program will work later in the spring of 2023. So stay tuned. So I want to talk a little bit about the fiscal year 22 distribution, which has already ended. In fiscal year 22, I am so pleased to say that OSSI has already approved, as of October 26th, over 3,000 early childhood educators who were found eligible for supplemental payments. We have dispersed, or in the process of dispersing, $35.69 million to those early childhood educators, which is a substantial amount of money. And we're very excited that so many early childhood educators have received these funds. But just as FY22 ends, fiscal year 23 begins. So we're starting our next round of distribution of these funds. As I said before, in fiscal year 23, OSSI and AidKit will continue to distribute funds directly to eligible early childhood educators. However, this year we will distribute funds in 4 payments rather than one single payment. Those payments will be distributed in December of 2022, March of 2023, June of 2023, and September of 2023. The eligibility criteria will be based on being employed in the quarter for which payments are distributed. You can see the cutoff by which a staff person would need to be employed for each quarterly payment in this slide. Because we are distributing payments in 4 installments this year, rather than all at once, the payment amount is a quarter of what the payment amounts received in fiscal year 22 are, but over the course of the year, educators who receive all 4 payments will receive the same total amount that we distributed in fiscal year 2022. If an educator works on a part-time basis, they will be eligible to receive half of these funding amounts. And the funding amounts are slightly different for educators who we are classifying as ECE 1, which includes assistant teachers, associate caregivers in child development homes and expanded homes, and Montessori assistant teachers, and ECE 2, which includes teachers, home and expanded home providers, and Montessori teachers. We can move on to the next slide. I will walk through the eligibility policy briefly. So there are 3 criteria that an early childhood educator must meet in order to be eligible to receive a supplemental payment from the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund in fiscal year 23. Those criteria are: first, be employed in a child development facility licensed by OSSI and working at least 10 hours a week. Second, be employed in an eligible role or staff type. Third, have an approved supplemental payment application submitted to AidKit. I'll now walk through each of these 3 criteria in more detail. First, be employed in a child development facility licensed by OSSI and working at least 10 hours a week. In order to be considered employed in a child development facility licensed by OSSI, an applicant must meet the following criteria. You must be, for any single payment, you must be employed on or before the first day of the month prior to the month in which payment is distributed. So to receive a payment in December, you must be employed by November 1st, today. To receive a payment in March, right? Yeah. So in March, you must be employed by February 1st, and so on and so forth. You must also be employed at the time you submit your application, and you must be employed at the time funds are distributed. You cannot be employed when you submit your application, then leave your job and subsequently receive funds. Funds are tied to continuing employment in a child development facility at the time the funds are distributed. I do want to also note, there are some early childhood educators who work in programs that are not licensed by OSSI, and those educators are not eligible for these funds. That would include staff employed by DC Public Schools or by a public charter school, as well as staff who work in facilities outside the district. Now I'll talk about the second criteria, being employed in an eligible role. To be employed in an eligible role, an applicant's staff type in DELT must be one of the following: teacher, assistant teacher, associate caregiver, expanded home provider, Montessori assistant teacher, or Montessori teacher. There are some staff types that are not eligible. This includes directors, lead teachers in pre-K enhancement and expansion program, or PKEEP classrooms, out of school time program, group leaders and assistants, aides and substitutes, and as I said a moment ago, staff in District of Columbia Public Schools and public charter schools. Eligibility is based on the staff type listed in OSSI's childcare licensing system, which is called the Division of Early Learning Licensing Tool, regardless of what you may be called at work. Your employer does provide that staff type to OSSI in our licensing system. However, in some cases, they use different titles in the program. If you have questions about your staff type and whether you are eligible, please speak with your employer. Finally, I want to talk about the requirement to submit an application and how supplemental payments will work in fiscal year 23. So if you are newly hired or newly eligible as an early childhood educator, you will need to submit an application. AidKit will send a link to the application for eligible early childhood educators. We will also post the link on the OSSI website. So if you do not get the link via text message or email, don't be alarmed. You can still go to the OSSI's website and apply. You go to that link and you complete the AidKit application through AidKit's platform. Ruth will tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. AidKit then matches the information you submit in your application to information from OSSI's childcare licensing data system. If we're able to make a match and confirm that you're eligible, you'll be approved and you will receive funds a few weeks later. If that information can't be confirmed, we will follow up with you and or your employer to collect additional information. In some cases, for example, if individuals misenter some information, or if there's an error in the information employer submitted, or if there are multiple records for an individual at different employers, that may require some additional exploration of the information to confirm eligibility, but that does not necessarily mean that you are not eligible. It just means it may take more time. There are two different ways to receive funds, which Ruthie will also talk about. If you have a bank account, you can receive funds via a direct transfer to your bank account. We are also providing funds on prepaid debit cards that you can either have mailed to your home address or pick up at one of two locations in the district. I just want to remind folks, we are in the midpoint of the implementation of this program through the end of our fiscal 23 or through September of 23. We will continue to distribute payments to eligible early childhood educators. Then roughly this time next fall, we will transition, we'll stop distributing payments directly to early childhood educators. However, early childhood employers will receive funds which they will use to increase the regular paychecks that early childhood educators receive. This is a long-term commitment from the district to increasing pay for early childhood educators, and we're very excited to work with you to continue direct payments this year, and then to work with your employers to increase your regular paychecks going forward. I think that brings us to the end of my remarks. Julia, do we have some time for questions now?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Mead. So our first question that we're seeing a good bit of in the chat is, will the quarterly payments be taxed?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. So supplemental payments are subject to both state and federal taxes. Unlike your paycheck, state and federal taxes are not withheld from these pay supplements that are distributed through this program. That means that you will need to report the income when you file your district, state, or federal taxes, and you may need to pay additional tax on these funds when you file your taxes in for 20. If you receive funds in calendar year 22, when you pay your 22 taxes, and if you receive funds in calendar year 2023, you may then have to pay taxes when you file your taxes in 2023, because this program does cross multiple tax years. AidKit will provide documentation that early childhood educators who receive funds will need to submit your taxes, but will not withhold state or federal taxes from your payment. Early childhood educators who receive a supplemental payment are strongly encouraged to consult with an accountant or other tax expert, and you may wish to consider saving a portion of funds that you receive to cover future tax liabilities as well.
Thank you. Another question that we've received, if an early childhood educator goes out on maternity leave or another temporary leave, are they still eligible to receive a supplemental payment?
First of all, if you're on maternity leave, congratulations on the addition to your family or on your impending child. Early childhood educators who are on temporary leave, for example, paid family leave, short-term disability, Family and Medical Leave Act, are eligible for funds provided that you were employed in a child development facility in an eligible role on or before the first day of the month prior to the month in which payment is distributed. So as I said before, that would be November 1st, 2022 for the December payment, February 1st, 2023 for March payment, May 1st for June payment, August 1st for September payment, depending on the quarter. You will also need to remain an employee of the facility and intend to return to work in the facility following the end of your temporary leave. So if your employer has questions about that, they can reach out to OSSI, and they can also always reach out to the district's Department of Employment Services if they have questions about the applicability of leave policies in your case.
Thank you. Another question we've received is about early childhood educators who might change jobs in between payments. So if they were to change jobs in between quarterly payments, would they still be able to receive the funds?
So in order to receive a quarterly payment, you must be currently employed at a child development facility licensed by OSSI in an eligible role on or before the first day of the month prior to the month in which payment is distributed. You must also be employed on the day funds are dispersed and have an approved supplemental payment application submitted to AidKit. If you change jobs or take another job in an eligible role in a different child development facility licensed by OSSI in between quarterly payments, you will still be eligible to receive your supplemental payment for that quarter if your gap in employment is less than 1 month, and if you are actually employed in one of those facilities on the eligibility dates that we've referred to earlier. But you or your employer may need to provide some additional documentation to support the change. And it's important that both your previous employer and your current employer update your records with OSSI to avoid potential confusion or slowing the processing of your payment. If you change jobs and are no longer employed in an eligible role in a child development facility licensed by OSSI, for example, you go work for the District of Columbia Public Schools or you go work in another state, then you would no longer be eligible to receive future supplemental payments.
And so if someone has been previously approved for a payment, maybe they've already received the payment and they switched facilities or started work at a new facility licensed by OSSI since that time, do they need to submit another application?
If you were previously approved for payment and you change jobs but are employed in another child development facility in an eligible role as of today, November 1st, you will not need to reapply to receive funds. Your prior eligibility and your record from your current job should allow you to continue to receive funds. It is important to make sure that your employer has entered you in the system in order to receive those funds. We are working with employers to remind them to do that as well.
Thank you. Another question we're getting is around if there are specific credential requirements. Are there requirements to meet specific education requirements, such as having a child development associate, a CDA, or an associate's degree to receive supplemental payments?
Yes, so to receive a supplemental payment, you must meet the eligibility criteria we walked through earlier in the presentation. In order to be employed in a particular staff type, you do need to meet the current credential requirements for that staff type. So if you are currently employed as a teacher, you must meet the current requirements to be a teacher. If you're currently employed as an assistant teacher, you must meet the current requirements of an assistant teacher. There has been a lot of attention, I know, among our early childhood educators about new education credential requirements that will be in effect as of December 2023. So we are increasing the credential requirements for teachers and assistant teachers at that time. However, you do not need to meet those new educational credential requirements in order to receive funds from the Pay Equity Fund in fiscal year 2023. We do really encourage you to pursue our available options through CDA programs, through the DC LEAD program, to obtain those requirements by December 2023, but you do not need to have them for this distribution of funds. I do want to note, however, that your staff role type or role is based on both your qualifications and your responsibilities at the facility that you're currently employed in. Just because you meet the qualifications requirements for a role does not necessarily mean that that is the staff type you are actually in currently. Your employer will need to enter your staff type in OSSE's licensing system based on both your role and your credentials.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think we have time for one more question. If my staff type changes between quarterly payments, for example, if someone was an assistant teacher and they were promoted to a teacher, would that impact the amount of their next payment?
Yes, so an early childhood educator's supplemental payment amount is based on their staff type in OSSE's licensing system, the Division of Early Learning licensing tool, on the first day of the month prior to the month in which payment for that quarter is distributed. So November 1st for December payment, February 1st for March payment, and so on. If your staff type changes between quarterly payments and your record in the Division of Early Learning licensing tool has been updated by your employer and signed off on by OSSE's licensing team by the first day of the month prior to the month in which payment for that quarter is distributed, you will receive the payment amount aligned with your new staff type. If you have questions about your staff type, again, please talk to your employer because your staff type is determined by what your employer enters in our licensing system and what the documentation supports.
Thank you, Sarah. I think now we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the nuts and bolts of applying for a supplemental payment through the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund. So for that, I will invite our partners at 8KIT, Ruthie, to join us and present.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ruthie Tesfaye. As mentioned earlier, I'm a senior program manager at 8KIT, and I am working on the Pay Equity Fund along with OSSE. Give you a little bit of background on 8KIT itself before diving into the nuts and bolts of the application. We can go to the next slide. So 8KIT is a relatively young company. We were spun out of a fund called Left Behind Workers Fund. This was a pandemic relief program that delivered millions in direct aid to workers without documentation in Colorado. And during that time, our co-founders had built a really unique system that featured a lot of automations to help accelerate the impact and efficiencies in cash assistance programs. And so over time, the co-founders decided to spin out into a separate company called 8KIT. And so 8KIT officially launched in 2001 to help enable support cash assistance programs throughout the country. On this slide, you'll see a highlight of some of our active programs. We're in a few states, mostly on the coast and a couple in the middle of the United States. We have 14 active programs throughout the country. We're growing rapidly, and we're really excited to be able to continue to support the DC community, the early educators, by supporting the Pay Equity Fund. You go to the next slide. On this slide, we'll just give you an overview of the 8KIT system itself and how it is a really closed loop integrated system that allows us to put together a program that is super seamless and all in one platform. So I'll go over each section really quickly so that we can get to the application demo. So our platform allows us to do all of these 8 functions within one system. So we're able to conduct outreach. So we earlier today, we sent notifications out to all existing eligible staff as well as new staff directly from our platform. And so our outreach system comes directly from our email addresses. And so that really helps consolidate the communications that are being received from AidKit to applicants. We also house the application directly in our platform itself, and we have the verification methods to ensure that you are that all eligible staff are able to receive their funds. All of this is seamlessly integrated in real time. So while you're submitting an application, we are verifying your information at the same time. Additionally, we are able to send notifications directly to either text or email directly to a phone to applicants, giving them updates on the status of their application. We're also able to make phone calls directly to applicants to respond to support tickets and requests. Our platform also is able to track the payments that are dispersed through our system. So we not only disperse payments, but we track them. We're able to give tracking codes for ACH transfers as well as bank debit card transfers. And our system is also equipped to handle the data privacy needs for programs like this. So we encrypt all information, all the PII or private information that is submitted in applications is set up securely in our system. So as soon as you submit something into the platform, we are able to secure it so that no one can access that information. So just a quick overview of how all of this happens within our platform itself to help support the Pay Equity Fund. And the last bit I'll talk about is one of our guiding principles that we've really incorporated at AidKit into all of our application programs and builds is that we really value the idea of balancing inclusion with integrity. So we know that this is really important to create a foundation of trust. And we really want to ensure that our programs are inclusive of the people that are typically excluded from programs, that cash assistance programs, and reach the intended population. So that is our big goal at AidKit, to make sure that the programs that we're supporting are able to reach the intended audience. But we also want to make sure that while doing this, we are maintaining the integrity and reducing any fraud or kind of bad actors in the system that might try to access the funds that shouldn't do so. So we really strive to have this balance to ensure that all eligible participants receive their funds while keeping people who shouldn't get it out of the system. So that's an overview of a little bit of AidKit, how we operate and how we manage programs. And now I'll get into some more nuts and bolts into the application, the Pay Equity Fund, the FY23 application and the deadlines. So unlike the FY22 program, the FY23 version of the Pay Equity Fund will be distributed into 4 payments. These payments, as Sarah Mead mentioned, will happen quarterly. So the application opened today and will be open through August 15 of 2023. And the first payments will occur in December for anyone who was eligible for the first payment. Eligibility is determined by many factors, but one of the most important dates to remember is that you must have been employed on or before November 1st to receive the first quarterly payment. So each quarterly payment month has a cutoff date. And so we are looking at your start date of employment at a certain facility to determine whether you're eligible for the upcoming payment. So as you submit your application, please keep these dates in mind to determine which quarterly payments you're eligible for. Each payment period has a new start date. And so the table on this slide, as well as on the policy guidelines, lists it out. And so you can reference that if you're curious. Another important date to keep in mind is the application deadline. So if you are, if you have not submitted, if you started to submit an application, please submit so now. If you know someone who might be starting an application later on, please make sure that everyone submits an application by November 15th if you are eligible for the first quarterly payment. The application period is rolling, so it will be open for throughout the entire fiscal year, but you must meet these deadlines in order to receive a quarterly payment, the corresponding quarterly payment. Once an early educator is approved for a quarterly payment and they receive their first payment, they do not need to complete an additional application. So once you're in the system and you're approved and you remain an active staff in a licensed facility by OSSI, you will automatically receive notifications throughout the year to remind you of the next upcoming quarterly payment, and then you will receive a payment at the same method, with the same payment method that you selected in your application. You can move to the next slide. Okay, so how to apply. So as Sarah mentioned earlier, there's two methods. If you either can go to the OSSI web page for the Pay Equity Fund and find the application link on the website, or you can use, you may have received an invitation link via text or email earlier today. If you received that link, you can go ahead and click. If you received an email or text, you can click the link included in that notification to submit an application. This is the same link that will be hosted on OSSI's website, so you can use either one. Both links will take you to the exact same place. If you are looking for the email notification and you did not receive one, you may search your inbox for an email from outreach@ecepayequity.aidkit.org. That is the email address that the invitation link will be coming from. Again, if you did not find it, no worries. You can go onto OSSI's website and apply directly from there. The application can be completed on a computer or a mobile device. It's user-friendly on both types of platforms. And the application is also available in 3 languages, English, Amharic, and Spanish. So I will show you on the next slide how to access the different languages. So as I mentioned, the application is available in 3 different languages. On this slide, you'll see screenshots of what the top banner looks like once you get to the application. The first screenshot will show you a circle, this red circle on the top right corner where it says English. The application link, if you go from the English web page, will automatically default to English, but once you click English, a drop down will show up and appear, and you'll be able to click between Spanish and Amharic right underneath it, and the entire platform will translate translate it into that corresponding language. And when I do the demo, I can show an active demonstration of how to switch between languages. And you can switch back and forth throughout as you're completing the application. So then before we get into the demo, I'll go over some required documents that will be needed to either submit, or some part of that information will be needed to complete the application. Gathering this in advance will help cut down on the time that you need to complete the application. If you are, if someone's supporting you with completing the application, let's say you go somewhere in person, these are the documents that you will need to have on hand. So it's important to gather those in advance. The first document that you will need is some sort of proof of identification. You will need to upload a government issued photo ID. It could be a US issued ID or a foreign ID. We also accept expired IDs. This ID just needs to have a photo, a picture of your face, as well as your full legal name printed on it. The second document that you will need to submit is a selfie. So this is a picture that you're taking in real time of your face. It should not be a photo that was taken, a full body photo, or a photo that was taken a while back, but it should be a photo that's taken at the time of the application submission. And this cannot be a photo. This cannot be like a cropped photo of your photo ID, but rather it really needs to be a selfie, a picture of your face. The third piece of information you'll need to submit your application is your child development facility license number. So this information at this part of the application, you'll have more information around where you can find this. This number should be posted at your facility. You may ask your director. You can also look it up on OSSI's website, and the link to search this number, your facility license number, will be included in the application. You will also be asked to provide bank payment information if you prefer to receive your payment via a direct bank transfer. So if you choose that option, you will be asked to input the name on your bank account, the account number, and the routing number. If you choose to go, and I say choose because you have the option to either use a direct bank payment, or you can pick up a debit card. You can, or you can select a debit card, which we can either mail, or you could pick up from a local partner in the district. So if you go through the bank payment option, you will need to provide some information up front so that we have that, so that we can transfer the funds to you if you're approved. And then the final two items that you will need to provide are your social security number. This will help us verify that who you are. So we will need your full social security number, as well as a complete and signed W-9 form. So the W-9, we've had a couple questions in the chat earlier asking about taxes and tax implications for this grant funds. You will need to pay taxes on the funds you receive from this program. And so the W-9 form is something that AidKit is collecting in order to issue a 1099 form, which is a form you will need when filing taxes to document that you received this grant. So a complete W-9 is essential, and our review team at AidKit will work with you if you submit something that is incomplete, but to process your application as quickly and efficiently as possible, we are asking that you complete all the required sections. And when we go through the application demo, I will show you all the required sections. All right, so let me begin to share my screen. They are going to start the application demo, and I'll walk through how to access the link, log in, and fill out the application in real time. Okay. Julia, can you confirm that you can see the OSSI website?
Yes, if you could just zoom in a little bit more, make it your full screen. Great.
Okay, let's see. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, you can access the application link on the OSSI website. So I've already gone to the website, which is OSSI, I believe it's, let's see, ossi.dc.gov/ECE pay equity. And the application link is here. So we'll click that link. And it will take us to the application page. So as we mentioned, this page will have the ability to translate immediately. So on this top right-hand corner, you will have the option to click between English, Espanol, or Amariña. These are the three languages that our application supports. So every part of the application platform will translate. So once you click Spanish, the menu will change to Spanish, the submit buttons will change to Spanish, and the same will happen with Amharic. So going back to English, the first section, the first thing I'll point everyone to is the navigation menu up here. You'll see that it lays out the 8 steps that will be required to complete to submit the application. As you get through each section, each page will load, will fill like purple circles, or the bar will complete, and so you will move on to the next section. Once you get to the final review section, that's when you'll be able to submit. The first section is the program overview. It will give you some information about the program itself. And so you can take some time to read through all of the information that's provided here. And here is some information about how you can contact the AidKit support team. And then I'll draw attention to these two buttons. This is how you will begin the application. If it's your first time getting to the application, you'll start a new application. If you started an application earlier in the day and you haven't completed it, you will hit resume. And this is where you'll be able to edit and complete the application if you've already started. Before you start the application, I do suggest that you also read the frequently asked questions that are listed below the start button. You can click to show the response here. It will drop down all of the responses to all the questions as you read them. There's really important information in these in the FAQ, and it will be really helpful to read those before you start your application. All right, so let's begin. So a few more tips about the application process itself. If you are completing an application, and you want to go back to previous section, there will be a button at the top that allows you to go back and forth, but you can't move forward until you've completed all the required questions in each section. So the first section is the application overview section. It goes over all of the required documents that I just mentioned earlier with the slides. And then it brings you to the first section that will actually ask you to fill out questions, which is the About You section. So the first question is, what is your name? And so you'll see that there are no other questions showing up until you complete this one. So the AidKit platform is designed in a way where each question only appears once you've submitted a successful response to the previous one. So for example, once I start typing in this box, my full legal name, the next question will appear. And this will happen throughout the entire application. And for this question, we really ask that what you put as your name matches what's on your license or legal documentation or W-9, just so that we have consistency across the entire application. And this will also help speed up your review of your application. The next question asks you to select the language you prefer to receive text or email communications. Selecting this language is important because we will send any approval or questions or updates in the language of your choosing. Once you select that, we ask you to input your cell phone number. This is something that you must be able to, this number you must be able to receive text messages from. So I will because we will send you a contact confirmation code to ensure that this number is yours and you have access to it. The contact confirmation code will happen once you type in a 10-digit valid US number. So once you put in a phone number, you will hit send confirmation code, and you can check your phone for that number. Once you get the number, enter it into the box and hit confirm code. If you input the number that was sent to you, it will confirm that your contact it will confirm your contact, and you can move on to the next question. And then you can put your email address here to receive email responses. And again, submit the send confirmation code, and then it will confirm that in the same manner as the phone number. If you received a text message or an email from AidKit earlier today or this afternoon, inviting you to apply, we ask that you use that same contact method to submit your application. And that will help expedite the process significantly. If you are unable to, that's okay. But if you are able to, that would be the best practice. The next question is to enter your date of birth. I'm just gonna put something here. Please confirm that the date of birth you inputted above is correct. Now, in the previous round, we did find that a lot of people mistyped their year or their day, And it's really important that this actually matches what is going to be on your driver's license or your legal documentation that your government issued ID that you're submitting. If it doesn't, then there's just like a little bit more of a delay in making sure that this information is accurate and up to date. And then finally, you're going to, for the last question in this section, is to input your the last 4 of your social security number or your ITIN number. So on this section, if you're a home-based provider, it's really important here that you do not enter your EIN number. You should only enter your social or your ITIN in this box. This program is for you as an individual and not as a business owner. And so we are looking for your social security number or your ITIN number here. If you submit something and you think that you may have submitted it incorrectly, your date of birth or your social security number, you can contact the Aid Kit support team and we will work on updating that for you. So you're asked to enter this twice. If you enter something different, you are not going to be able to submit it. If the save button will not allow you to submit it, it can only be 4 numbers long. So please make sure that that is that you're entering the same number twice. Once you hit save, this box, this next section will appear, and that is the demographic section. So you can click that button and it will take you to the next section, and you can see on top how all the bars are filling up as we go through the section. If you realize you want to go back to the About You section, you can click this button on the top and it will take you back. This demographic info you can fill out pretty quickly. It doesn't require you to upload anything here. What is your gender? What gender identity do you most identify with? What best describes your ethnicity? And then a question about what best describes your racial or ethnic identity. For these questions, you can always choose prefer not to answer. Or you can answer for the race and ethnicity question, you can select multiple options. And if you select other, a drop-down box will appear and you can just describe how you self-identify. The final question in this section is your address. This field will start to auto-populate after you enter a certain amount of information. So I'm gonna put Aussie's address. I didn't finish it, but you can see that it's not a complete address, so it won't populate. But once I start adding a few more details, it starts to recognize the address. You'll notice here that if you live in an apartment or a place that has a unit number, you will need to add that in. It might not catch it automatically, so please ensure that that address is accurate. We do use that to send, to issue documents to you. If it's correct, please hit yes, it's correct. And then you're able to move to the employment section. This employment section is where you'll be able to answer, input the information like the facility license number. So it does ask a question to confirm that you are working in a licensed child development facility in the District of Columbia. Everyone here is here because most likely they are. So we'll hit yes, and then we'll collect some information about your role in the facility. So you can put the role that you, your staff type or your role in the facility. So if you're an assistant teacher, you click that. And then the next question is, what is the name of your facility? You can enter the program, the name of the program you work in. And then this is the question where you will enter your facility license number. Again, it does give you the link here. So if you are not sure what the license number is, you can click this link and it will take you to the web page where you can search for your facility name. You can also follow up with your director or your facility point of contact. And if you are unable to get a response from either of those two options, you can email Aussie and Aussie will be able to provide the number to you. When you input that number into the application, please use the this format where you're using the prefix of what type of center you are. So if you're a center, you use CDC. If you're a a home-based program, you will use CDX for an expanded home program, or CDH if you are not. It's just a facility with up to 6 children. So this will not allow you to enter your response in any other format. So if you try to submit something like this, it would remind you to please double check that you're using the appropriate format. So we'll just do CDC, and I'll say I work at CDC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The next question asks if your primary employer is at DCPS or public charter school. If it is yes, please enter the name of the program you work at, of the school you work at. If no, then you will not receive that question. And then this question asks how long you've been an educator, put the amount of years that apply to you. And then this question corresponds to your employment status. So part of the payment formula is that we use your employment status in conjunction with your staff type to determine how much funds you should receive if you're approved. This is the question that we use to determine that. So based on your status at your current role, at your job, please select the option that works best for you. So if you work an average of 30 hours or more a week, or at least 240 hours over the past 8 weeks, you will select full-time. And if you work less than that, so between 10 to 30 hours a week or 80 hours over the past 8 weeks, you'll select part-time. If none of these apply to you and you work less than 10 hours a week or less, or you have not worked 80 hours for the past 8 weeks, you work less than part-time and you would select that option. Just a reminder, for this program, the payments only go out to those who work full-time or part-time. And then there's a section around benefits. This is to help support OSCE's efforts to support equitable compensation and create a more equitable workforce. And so the answers that you provide here will help towards that effort. So if you have health insurance, you will get a drop-down question where it asks you to enter more information. If you don't, you can just select no, and you won't get that question. Similarly, it might ask you if you have other benefits. If you do, select yes, and the options will appear. If you don't, you can select no and move on to the next section. The next section is the verification section. Just 2 questions that appear here. You only see the first one until you complete the second one. I'm going to minimize my screen just for a second. This is where you will need to upload your photo ID. The first one is for the photo ID, and the second question that pops up will be for your selfie. So remember, this should be a government issued one, so like a passport or license or any type of government issued ID. You will click upload document and attach the document to this section. So I have mine on my browser on my desktop already. So I'm just going to drag my, oh no, let me not do that. I'm going to open upload document. I'm going to find it somewhere in here. Here we go. My passport, and it's going to upload. Now I have passport. If you accidentally uploaded the wrong document to this section, you can hit remove and do it again. So hit upload the document I want. You can also do this on your cell phone. So if you have something, if you have your ID out, take a picture and then log into the application on your phone and upload it from there. That way you can probably have cut out the need to like scan something or email something because you are able to complete the application on your phone. The second is a selfie. So this is a clear photo of your face. It can't be a headshot. So take a picture of your face, and I mean, like I'm using a headshot right now, but take a selfie and upload it here. Once that's good to go, you'll hit next and you'll go to your payment information section. And this is where you'll be able to tell us how you want to receive payment if you're approved. Like I mentioned earlier, there's 2 options. There's a direct bank deposit option. And if you have a bank account, this is the the method that we suggest and encourage because it's the most secure and the most efficient. We'll be able to transfer it directly to you as soon as we receive the funds, and you won't have to wait in the mail for a card. But if you do not have a direct bank account, you can select the debit card option. And there are two options for a debit card. One is to have it mailed to your house, and the second is to have a pickup option. So we have two locations, and we're working with DC Child Care Connections, and there are two locations for pickup. One is in Southeast on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, I believe. And then the other is in Northwest on Upshur Street. So there's two locations, Ward 4, Ward 8, where you can pick up debit cards, and you will get more information on that process if you're approved, and you'll be able to sign up for a time, a date to pick up a card. So let's go the bank direct deposit route. So if you we have a picture of a check, and so we want you all to be able to find all the information you need for the application. So if you are selecting this, you need your bank routing number. So if you have a Bank of America, let's use Bank of America for example. If you have a Bank of America account, bank routing numbers are universal. This isn't like private information, so this will automatically tell us what bank it is based on the number you input. So Bank of America, most people, this is the routing number. And then we will need your account number. This is the unique number that's unique to your actual account and will be found in the middle of your check if you're looking at a check. But you can also log on to your mobile app and figure out the account number that way as well. So you enter the account number. You will enter this twice and hit save. Once we hit save, it will encrypt your bank account number so no one has access to it. This is going to be locked and we won't be able to open it again. And then we will need the name on your account. So the name on your account is not like the bank name. So on this line, we've seen a lot of individuals put like Capital One or Bank of America, things like that. But this is actually the name that corresponds to you. So it should be tied to your personal name. So I will put my name here. If this isn't correct, there are delays in transferring the funds. And so we just want to make sure that this is as accurate as possible the first time you submit your application. And then finally, you will check if it's a checking or a savings account. All right, so that's if you go the bank direct deposit route. If you do prepaid debit card, then it will ask you pick up in person or mail. And then it will give you the information corresponding to the selection. So if you pick mail, you'll have to put your address. If you put pick up in person, it will tell you that you will get more information soon. And then finally, the last section is to upload a W-9. So the W-9 is, we have instructions here on how to complete W-9 successfully. These are the required fields on a W-9. Let's see if I can make this bigger. Okay, so on the page, we've highlighted all of the required fields for a W-9. So the first required field is your legal name, the full legal name. This should be exactly how it appears on your tax returns. All applicants also should check this box as an individual sole proprietor. This box must be checked in order for your W-9 to be complete. You also need to put your full address, so like the number, the street, the city, the state, and the zip code, as well as your social security number or ITIN in the first set of boxes. Nothing should be in the EIN boxes. All of it should be in the social, regardless of if it's a social or an ITIN. And finally, you will need to sign and date your W-9. A W-9 that's not signed or dated is not complete. And so we will have to follow up if that is missing. So these are the only required fields. Once you complete that, you can hand complete it. You can do it by hand or you can do it electronically. You will upload the document same fashion that you completed the photo ID and the selfie. Click the upload document box and upload your W-9. And then there's a checkbox that says I confirm that my W-9 is correct. And then this is the section where you will enter your full social twice. And then you're ready for the final review. And so this is the section that kind of gives you like an overview of all of the, not all of questions, but the most important questions that you have inputted that might require some editing. So you can review the legal name you put, the date of birth. If you put an email out, you can look at that, your cell phone, your address, and your employment status. If everything is correct, you'll hit yes. If everything is not correct, please select no, and then you'll get this message that asks you to go back to the section to edit the questions until you can say that everything is correct. We also ask if, for informational purposes, if anyone's helping you complete this application. If so, you can select the individuals who are. If not, you don't have to. And then we have a final attestation that says, I provided that information and the best of my knowledge, and you can sign it by either typing your signature or using your mouse, and it will save your signature. The last question asks about following up with any further surveys or questions for consent for voluntary surveys. If you're into accepting that, you can hit yes. If not, you can hit no, and then you're ready to submit. So the submit button is the last step, and please make sure you hit the submit button. We will not receive your application if you do not hit it. So once you click submit, it will take you to the all done page and you've successfully submitted. You will receive a text confirmation that says we received your application, and we will follow up with more information once we have it. So that is the overview of how to complete your application. I will stop sharing my screen so we can go back to the main presentation and answer any questions.
Thanks, Ruthie. As we get our slides back up, could you talk through just a little bit about where folks can find technical assistance?
Yes. So there are a couple of avenues where we can provide technical assistance. AidKit itself has reviewers and support team. You can either email the support line at support@ecepayequity.aidkit.org, which is all included in the application, or you can call our phone number, which will be on the next slide, I believe, and leave a voicemail there, and our support team will get back to you. Additionally, MSSPA, the Multicultural Spanish Speaking Providers Association, is hosting in-person support next Saturday at Estrellitas. It's a facility in Northwest DC. And so if you email our support team or call our support team, you can request more information on how to attend that in-person TA session.
Great, thank you. And if we can move our slides, I think just 2 over. Perfect. So this has a little more information, so we'll just pause here. And as Ruthie mentioned, AidKit does have support specialists who can provide support in multiple languages, including English, Spanish, and Amharic. Alrighty, and I think now we'll move into our Q&A. We've received a handful of questions in the chat, probably more than a handful. But Ruthie, can you tell us if someone thinks that they might have made an error in their application after they submitted it, who should they contact if they need assistance?
Yeah, so if you think you need to make a change or an error, you made an error in the application, you can email the support line using that email address on the screen, support@ecepayequity.aidkit.org. support.akit.org, or you can call us at 202-831-9298 and leave a voicemail with like describing like your need, and support specialist from AKIT will call you back in your requested language to support.
And another question we've heard a good bit of, who is supposed to complete the application? Is it your employer, or are you, the early childhood educator, responsible for completing the application?
Yeah, that's a good question. So early childhood educators are responsible for completing the application and submitting it on their own behalf. So if you're newly hired, which means like if you were hired after May 16th, 2022, and you didn't qualify for the supplemental payment that happened in the fiscal year 22, or you're someone who transitioned from an ineligible staff type to an eligible one, you are the person who should be submitting an application to receive payment for FY23. The application is open. We opened it this morning. And so that population that I just described should submit an application. If you were approved for a supplemental payment in the fiscal year 2022, you don't need to submit an application. And I know there are some questions if you are still waiting on payment, but you were approved, you still fall into that group of people who were approved, and you should not submit an application because we do automatically put you in the eligible pool. And so you will automatically receive an FY23 quarterly payment if you were already approved and maintain eligible. And earlier this afternoon, that notification to that group also went out. So you should have received confirmation that you do not need to submit an application there. We know that there are multiple disbursements of payments, and so prior to each payment distribution, AidKit will send communications to the educators who previously received funds, notifying them of the upcoming payment, and that communication will include a link that will you'll be able to like review all of your payment information and update payment information, or change or decline decline to receive a payment. So you have the opportunity to make a change prior to each disbursement if a change has occurred. If you don't take any action, so you receive that link, you're eligible, and you don't take any action, your payments will automatically be sent to that same payment method in which that prior payments were dispersed. So if you don't take action, nothing happens. We just continue to pay you in the same method. That being said, during each payment period, AidKit is still validating, revalidating to ensure that people, educators are still employed and actively employed in a facility. You do not have to remain in the same facility, but we still are validating to ensure that you are still eligible. And if in the event that you are no longer employed or leave the profession or leave the working in an OSCE licensed facility, you will receive notification updating you that you're not eligible for that payment at that time. So if that was a long answer, but so if you have any questions about your specific situation, you can always email the same email address, and our support specialist will be able to provide like a more personalized response for your specific situation.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. So what is the deadline to submit an application to receive a payment for Q1? So that would be the December 2022 payment.
Yes. Okay. So the deadline to submit an application for the first quarterly payment is November 15th at 5 p.m. So as we mentioned earlier, the application is rolling, but in order to receive that payment in December, you must submit an application by November 15th.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Ruthie, for that demo and answering our questions. I will now hand things back over to Deputy Superintendent for Early Learning, Sarah Mead, to close out our session. And if we can move over, our slides, just one more, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia, and thank you, Ruthie, for all that information. And again, thank you to all of you who joined the call today and for taking the time. We hope this information was helpful for you, and please continue to reach out to us if you have questions about the fund that were not answered tonight. As we close, I want to leave you with a few suggested next steps and highlight some of the materials that we've shared in the chat. So some next steps that we would suggest for you if you are a newly hired or newly eligible educator to apply for the Pay Equity Fund for FY23. First, if you haven't already, gather the information listed here so that you're prepared to complete your application. We'll drop a link in the chat box to an application checklist you may find useful. Second, visit the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund webpage to find a link to the application. It is live now, as Ruthie just said, and we'll drop a link to the webpage in the chat. Third, if you have questions about the application or need to request support in completing the application, you can email support@ecepayequity.aidkit.org. We'll put that email in the chat as well, or call 202-831-9298. We'll put that phone number in the chat as well, and leave a voicemail. That phone number is not answered in real time, but an application support specialist does check it regularly and will follow up to provide assistance. Again, we'll put that information in the chat. Finally, please remember to complete and submit your application before November 15th, 2022 at 5 p.m. You must complete and submit the application by that timeline in order to receive a December 2022 payment. Again, thank you for joining us this evening. For more information on the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund, please do visit our website that is dedicated to the fund at osce.dc.gov/ECE-PayEquity. You can see the link on the slide, and we'll put that in the chat as well. That link has a host of resources and additional information about the fund, including the application checklist I just mentioned, the eligibility and payment policy in writing if you have questions, and a frequently asked questions document that has answers to many of the questions that folks have asked in the chat tonight and that we routinely receive. We do also update that document from time to time as we receive additional questions. If you have questions about the Early Childhood Educator Pay Equity Fund that are not about specifically how to fill out the application or the status of a current application, please email osce.delcommunications@dc.gov. That is the General Division of Early Learning Communications email address, and someone will respond to your email. We'll share that email address in the chat as well. Thank you again for joining us this evening. Thank you again so much for the incredible work that you are doing with children and families in the district. And we look forward to continuing to distribute funds to you over the next year. Thank you.